We're also live on YouTube, okay?
I'm live on YouTube.
Yeah.
I want to be here, Ronny. Record it, please.
Let me know when you're done, so I'll come turn everything off, okay?
Is there,
What else do you need, Ron?
I gotta get the MLS.
You have the MLS? Right there. Exit that actually, sorry. Go here. It'll just be normal. Use these profiles. There you go. Real temp on
How's it going?
Yeah, you know,
Good. You guys know anything about flood? Flood policies? I don't know everything either. It's okay.
yeah, I mean, I just, this is my second class, okay?
Is it? Nice.
Just
Well,
random.
are you? When did you get licensed?
On the 10th,
Nice. Congratulations. What's your name?
it's a lot.
Salah. I'm Ronny.
Nice.
How about you? You're new?
Well, I have the license for a year now, but, you know, I just started
Coming up. Nice. Where'd you come from?
coming from
Nice. What part?
LA.
Yeah? I lived in Chino Hills for a little bit of time. Yeah, very short time. Yeah, very short time. But it was nice. It was expensive though.
Chino, yeah.
Yeah, Chino was expensive. I think my apartment was like $1,500 a month. So
That's in the low end.
yeah, that was just a studio. So,
Wow.
I paid like $3,000, $2,000.
yeah, it's crazy out there. Okay, so first, you guys know how to even look up if the house is in a flood zone?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You don't? Okay. So it's a good, so when you have your clients or buyers, sellers, even, because I think on your seller's disclosures, for example, if you're taking a listing, the question is, do you have flood insurance on the property, not if it's in the flood zone. So correct me if I'm wrong. But the question for it to be, it's kind of like, because I had a listing one time. Does the property have flood insurance? And I marked no, but it was in a flood zone. But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. So a listing disclosure, seller's disclosure, the question on there for flood doesn't say the question doesn't say is it in a flood zone. The question says do you have flood insurance?
Correct.
Right. So I marked no, but if the property was in a flood zone, he just didn't have a mortgage or anything like that. So it's up to you guys to kind of figure out if it actually is in a flood zone, and you guys don't know how to look that up yet, right? That's why I'm logged in, so I can show you. This is also going to help you insurance purposes when you call me and say, hey, my guy needs insurance. You may already tell me, hey, he's in a flood zone. He's going to need a flood policy as well. So I'm just going to go to the map. Or let's just look at this. This is my old house I sold it, so that's why I know the address. All right, so this is my old house, is what I sold. But if you want to look up if it's in a flood zone or not for any of your listeners or buyers, if you want to show them a house, just click on the listing and click on this mini map under the pictures, and this comes up. You see these layers over here to filter it. Click on flood zone. And boom. So X means it's not in a flood zone. So they're not going to need flood insurance when they're in London. But if I move, let's say south, down Telegraph, AE, this purple is a flood zone. Well, it's going to get tricky for some properties is when part of it is not in a flood zone and part of it is. And then you're gonna have to talk to the lender on if they're gonna require it or not. So we have properties on these maps that, the line has to stop and end somewhere, or stop and start somewhere. So like, this house is probably considered not in a flood zone, but his next door neighbor is, or vice versa. This guy's
Right.
not. What's that?
Why does that question go to the lender, not like you?
Because the lender is gonna go off of their underwriters on. Now, I can say, because we've had discrepancies where this one right here that says it's in a flood zone, AE, my insurance carrier said they're close enough out of it that we're not gonna require it from our side. But the lender is gonna say, no, he needs to have it for the loan. Okay? If they're close on DTI, having a flood insurance policy now in the mix might kind of hurt the deal. So it's important to know where to find this.
Do you mind going back to that map?
Yeah, sure.
How did you get there?
Yeah, so when you go to a listing, under basically the photos, this little mini map right here, and then you'll click on these layers it's like a filter where all these little things come up, but you'll look at flood zone, and then it'll highlight. Okay,
So the ones on the orange are on the flood zone?
it's not, well, technically it's a flood zone, but it's basically very minimal risk where they don't feel like anything would happen. But as last summer proved, that whole area in X ended up got flooded.
So with FHA, they're requiring a flood inspection, right?
Yeah, so FHA and conventional are different with their flood. If it's in a flood zone, both of them are gonna
Or
say,
required, even if
both of them will require the flood policy, but so that's one of my things here. That's actually one of the next things I was gonna talk about. If you're FHA, you cannot go through a private flood company. And it kind of limits what policy we can put you, what carrier we can put you through. It has to be a government-backed policy, the NFIP. So for me, we only have one carrier to go through, and every insurance agent is only gonna have that one carrier. And if if it's quoted the same way, they're all gonna have the same price. It's when it becomes conventional, then we can go private. So conventional rules allow me to go private flood company, which gives me a little bit more flexibility, and I have 3 more carriers to go through. So that's important too. It's a good point to bring up. If your client's FHA, they're only going to have one company I can go through. It has to be government backed. But sometimes, even private flood companies are going to be more expensive than the government backed one because they changed their rates last year. So last year it was kind of crazy with some policies with $3,000 a year that completely killed the deal, and now they're a lot more reasonable. So yeah, so I would so. Personally, you guys, when you go out to see a house, check. I mean, you'll end up getting used to what areas are in a flood zone. So like over here, there's like a mix. See, so this whole area here ends up being the flood zone, and on the outskirts, it's not. And this is just south of us, Outer Drive and Monroe area. So you'll start once you're going into those areas to show the houses. It's a good practice to check whether or not it's in there, especially if the lender already told you we're tight on numbers.
Is that yellow undetermined or 500 year?
The yellow is also technically out of the flood zone. They believe once every 500 years something may happen. But
Okay. So that's not as bad as the purple, huh?
Yeah, that's not going to even, because the X is what's the code. So X is the code, A is a different code. A is going to be in the flood zone.
Okay.
Anything with an X, you're out of it, or a C, you're out of it. But like I was saying, last summer, it didn't matter where you lived. I think over here got flooded, East Dearborn got flooded, and they're all in the X.
Oh yeah, I love a good gun flood.
Yeah, so it's not, I can't ever say now it's never gonna happen. 20 years ago when I first started doing it, it was unheard of. But now it happened 3 times in the last 7 years.
Yeah, all of our systems is kind of needed.
Yeah, so it's very important. Now, don't get confused. There's differences between water backup and flood. So water backup, I can put on a homeowner's policy and we don't have a problem. Flood, no insurance company will cover it through the homeowner's policy. So that's why you have to have a separate one. And that's why sometimes it can hurt the deal. But it's not required, obviously, when it's outside of the flood zone. Renters can also get it, so if you have a renter that's just renting out the property, or you have a landlord who rented it out, they can also get a flood policy. They can also put water backup on their policies to cover, instances of the likes of what happened last summer. Everyone's gonna be different. I don't know what's inside these basements, for example. So if you have a Persian rug that's 15 grand, I don't think you're gonna want $5,000 of coverage. So you just wanna, let me know what's kind of down. Basically what's gonna end up being covered. So a flood, the main difference is it's gotta be rising water around the house that comes in through like the foundation, for example, right? If it comes in through the water system, the sewer drain in the basement, more than likely that's gonna be a water backup coverage, won't be under flood. So they determine it by rising water around the house that's normally dry. And it has to affect 2 different properties. So it can't be just yours that flooded out of a storm. So last summer would classify. But if it was just you and your neighbor was perfectly dry, it might have been degrading on your house after heavy rain. And you have to grade the property properly. So if it's coming in this way, obviously you're just gonna have an issue, but it has to be 2 properties that get affected, or I believe 2 acres that are normally dry. What they'll cover on it is obviously the building and contents, foundation, permanently installed cabinets, panels, carpet, foundation walls, staircases, detached garages, those will be covered as well. Washer, dryer, curtains, furniture, those things will be covered under the flood policy. What's not going to be covered is if the cause of the flooding. So like I said, it has to be. Remember, if it's only your house, they're not going to cover it. Even if you have a flood policy and technically it was a flooding, it has to affect more than just your property. Water backup does get covered under this policy as well. So if your water backup coverage gets exceeded on the homeowner's policy, the flood policy will kick in to that limit. Take care of it. Your cars are not going to be covered under your flood policy, by the way. So if it's in your driveway and that car got flooded, it's going to be under your auto insurance policy under comprehensive. So same thing. Yeah, your auto insurance policy should have a. Now, if you do just liability only, you're not going to be covered. But if you have comprehensive coverage on there, it's going to be subject to the deductible, and then you'll be covered for that for your car. They won't cover money. So if you said you have $1,000 in your basement, they're not going to give you $1,000. Business interruption. This is important because now in COVID, we're working from home a lot more. So those people that work from home, we're not going to pay their income that they lost because they flooded. They should have a business policy in place to cover business interruption.
The LLC or something to do that.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be an LLC, so it can get sold off, for example. But the most important thing is your homeowner's policy is not going to cover business interruption, nor will the flood policy. So if you are running a business from your home, you should have a business policy reflecting that.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's also, talk to your accountant. There's some breaks in there that can help you with that, and you can get a Comcast business for internet and write off some of that stuff. So, there are coverage. So when we were talking about FHA and conventional, if we go FHA, there are coverage limits. So 250,000 is the max. So if the house is being covered, if it's worth 500,000, the max that they're going to cover under that program is 250,000. 100,000 is on contents, so your furniture and stuff like that. But if you're conventional, I can go up to the 500, 600,000. That would be a problem. But that's because we have to do go private. Government back has limits. So,
That's weird.
yeah.
I think it's the opposite, right?
No, it's just how it's. How the
Like
policy is
first-time
structured.
homebuyer,
Yeah, no, I get you.
first home. Catches on.
FHA, honestly, I don't know. You guys tell me. Are you seeing FHAs for $500,000-600,000 houses?
No.
So
Okay,
probably
that
not.
makes sense.
Yeah,
thought it was over
I don't know. That's an honest question. I don't know the answer.
No, they're all usually under 200.
Okay, so if they're typically around that range, that's probably why they structured it that way. The other thing is, even if, let's say you're in one of these zones that doesn't require flood, but you're one of those people that were affected last summer and you want a flood policy. I've been selling flood policies to people that are outside of the zone because it's cheaper, obviously. But they've been wanting it more to protect themselves. There is a waiting period. If it's not for a loan closing, if it's gonna be like the government back one, it's like a 30-day waiting period. So if you quoted it today, 30 days later, it takes effect. So no matter if something happens within that 30-day, you're not gonna be covered. If it's for a loan closing, it's immediate. If you're closing tomorrow, there is no waiting period. If we go private, the waiting period, I believe, is 2 weeks, last time I checked. Instead of 30. So if you didn't require it in the beginning, you can go private or you can go government back. So. Any questions?
That's for flood insurance.
Yeah.
I heard that flood insurance doesn't cover it unless it like comes through like the front door. not like-
Yeah, so that's what I was saying earlier. So water backup is an optional coverage on every home policy. So it's important. Some insurance agents are not going to put it on there unless they ask you. And obviously, if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't know what to ask for. I quote it with everything.
Oh, okay,
The
so
only
you
time
can
I don't
throw
have,
it in there?
yeah, if I have a policy that doesn't have it, I know they told me to take it out.
Especially with their phone.
Yeah, all my policies are quoted with at least 5,000 water backup. So that's if the sewer backs up into the basement. It's important which company you go through too. So some insurance companies are going to kind of say, hey, no, you're not going to be covered for water backup due to it being a flooding. But then Safeco last year actually covered it, gave 5% more, and they waived the deductible. This was last year. I'm not going to say it's going to be every time. But it matters which company you go through. You get what you pay for, right? So some companies are a lot cheaper, but you might have some issues claims process. Some companies are more expensive, but it's like white glove service. So it is what it is that way. But water backup, it depends. I would say you can go. I have a company, you can go up to the limit of the dwelling amount. So if the house is being covered for 300,000, you can have your water backup for 300,000. Yeah, because I'm doing basements now in East Dearborn.
Yeah.
Second, like little apartments in the basement, right? Kitchens and stuff like that. So it makes sense with some of those people. Average, I'm seeing 10 to 20,000 of coverage, and you can put that. But water, the flood coming in through the wall and the front door and stuff, that's going to be under a flood policy. And if it wasn't required of you when you bought the house, you're not going to think about it. It's just been talk of the town lately since last summer. And everybody is so confused on water backup and flood. Yeah, because whenever I write a policy, I'll suggest it, and they're saying, no, I have it. No, you don't. You don't have flood.
I got people like showing houses in East Dearborn and places, asking us to flood zone. I never used to get asked that question. Unless we're in Dearborn Heights, 405.
Yeah.
Next to that board, but like now people are.
As
But
far
I know
as-
what they mean. I think they're thinking about the background. Like, has it
They're
flooded?
thinking about backup because
Yeah,
East Dearborn, right? Where are we here? Southfield.
that's way, it's far from. my
Yeah.
neighborhood.
So here, this is Schaefer, right? Schaefer and Warren. It's not in a flood zone.
Right.
That's an X. So there are talks of it changing though.
No way.
Yeah. Because of what happened last year. Because it happened, the year before? It happened twice last summer, right? Happened end of June, and then it happened again like 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
So there's talks of them changing the flood map. So I hope not, because that hurts also.
It could
real
bring
estate.
the prices down on the homes. too.
It'll bring the prices down. It hurts real estate by bringing the prices down, and it also hurts real estate because if you're already at a tight DTI, yeah, you're not gonna be able to afford the house once I give you a policy for $1,000 a year extra on top of your home.
And
Right now, these
the way they
policies,
calculate DTI, sorry,
yeah,
what was it?
right now, these policies outside of the flood zone are averaging like $400, $500 a year. Put it in a flood zone, it's gonna be over 1,000.
So with that like difference right there, that could actually hurt the buyer probably like $50,000 to $70,000 on the pre-approval.
Well, the lender would know the numbers, but yeah,
Right.
they're gonna hurt the
Somewhere around there.
pre-approval.
It's gonna hurt their,
Yeah, but the lender sometimes doesn't.
but the
Isn't-
price is gonna lower, so it's like.
Yeah, but the lender, a lot of times I'm finding, isn't aware that the house that the client put the offer on is gonna be in a flood zone. So they give them a pre-approval based on no flood zone.
Flood check, yeah.
So once the house comes through, they put the offer on, even then, the lender doesn't know until underwriting kicks at them with a condition, hey, we need flood insurance. And then that's when we all get kind of nervous.
Yeah.
But luckily, like I said, it's for the most part, I'm finding a way to make it all work.
I think maybe if the city of Dearborn does like what they said they're gonna do, like change the plumbing, fix the pumps and stuff, they might not.
I think if, yeah, so but I think if what happened last summer happens this coming summer, the talk is gonna get more serious. If we don't have that type of an issue,
It's a city issue more than anything.
yeah,
It's not
it is.
even the grading.
It definitely is, but these flood maps were determined based on the likelihood of something like that happening to damaged homes, right? So in the past, 48125 was an issue with flooding. Now some parts are, yes, but other parts aren't, right? You know this, and it's like nothing has ever happened to some of those houses. But now East Dearborn, nothing ever happened in the past, now it's happened. So that's why there might be a mapping change. Yeah, it is. But it's important for you guys to know how to look it up for your listings and for your, because like I was asking Mikey, the disclosure doesn't say is your house in a flood zone. The disclosure says you have flood insurance.
Right.
So one of my listings, when I did one, was in a flood zone. I had an offer first day, full ass, ready to go, blah, blah, and then they figured out it was in a flood zone, and he was yelling at me saying, you should have told me. I'm like, I did give you the disclosure. He doesn't have insurance on with flood because it was, yeah, because it was on free and clear. There was no requirement. Just because you're in a flood zone, mind you, you don't have to have flood insurance. The requirement comes from the lender.
Last question.
Yeah, no, I like it.
So, how much is the average cost of home insurance a year for a house around 250?
So there's a lot of different variables for something like that, because not only am I gonna have to go based off of the house, because we don't go based off the purchase price.
Oh,
I could care less. So like a house in New York, for example, like this house the house that I sold, if I put it in New York, it's worth over $1 million, but I could build it for less, right? So the insurance goes based off of what can we build it for. Yeah, so you'll see houses now, because the values have gone up 20%. Okay. A house that sold for 900,000, I quoted it yesterday, but the coverage was 800 something. So the lender can't tell me to increase it, can't tell me to decrease it. I go based off of the reconstruction cost, right? And so that shows that we're covering it for less than what it sold for. So it's just somebody who's willing to pay more. But the cost wise, I would say your lender should be averaging in like the Dearborn area, Dearborn market, like at least $1,200 a year. Reason for that is, yes, I'm finding 800 and as you know, like 600 sometimes. Those are very rare, by the way. I think Haas got Haas got the family deal.
Oh my
But
God. Am I locked in?
yeah, you are. But I would say average on 1,200, because last summer when everybody filed the claim for water backup, that water claim follows the house and it follows the client. So if you have a buyer.
Oh, if I was a house in?
Yes. So if you go buy a house right now for a basement that had a claim for water backup, you're gonna get surcharged for it. So your policy goes from $1,000 a year down now maybe 1,500, 1,600. Which,
Same way for cars and all.
no, well, yeah, some claims in the history of the car, like if it was in an accident and it's salvage title or the frame damage, that'll pop up, that'll populate. It's not as bad as homes though, you know, the difference. But, yeah. Chances are if you're buying a salvage title, I don't think it's going to coverage. No way. Anybody else have any questions? What would you guys want to hear about next? And it doesn't have to be home insurance.
Oh,
I do
here's
home-
one because I'm like, so.
I do home, auto, life, business, liability, builder's risk.
So when we're closing on a house, like when like the plans of closing comes up, their insurance, I always get confused with this. Is it prepaid for the year? Is that what is paid at closing?
Yes, so, but they're also going to be paying monthly through their escrow, right? And so sometimes they get
So they're
confused.
paying twice.
Yeah,
basically
but you
the
can't
first
fund
year?
an escrow account at zero,
Okay.
right? So the first year is going to be paid at closing from their closing costs. And then every month, what they're doing is they're making that payment into their escrow account. So that escrow account ends up getting funded for when renewal comes, they
That's what I
have,
get.
yeah, they have the renewal amount so that way the mortgage company can send it. The issue that I take with it is we're basing it off of the current rate. So let's say we did $1,000 a year, or simple math, $100 a month, $1,200 a year. If the renewal goes up with, I would say 95% of the time it does, because you have to keep up with inflation and material and all that. The escrow is funded at 1,200, but the insurance is now 1,300. So then the client will get an increase in their mortgage payment, thinking, what happened? And then they call me, I'm like, yeah, your home insurance increased that renewal. But I could reshop it. I mean, I'm a broker, so I have other companies I can go through. But yeah, to answer your question, they fund it immediately to pay, but they do pay monthly to fund the next year coming up.
It's not a fixed rate, but it changes every year.
It will change every year, yes. 2 years ago, for example, building a house costed much less than right now. Right? Labor and material have gone up astronomically, and we have to keep up with that. So you'll notice from renewal to renewal, let's say we start covering the house for 300,000, your renewal will start saying 330,000. So it's not necessarily an increase on you just because we want to, it's because we have to keep up with what's happening in the area. And sometimes the rates will come down, even if the coverage goes up, because the insurance, it's a business. We're not a nonprofit business, right? So if I'm paying out, if I'm collecting, let's say $100,000 a year in premium, but I'm paying out 200,000 in claims, my insurance rates have to go up so I can stay in business. Right? Not me personally, the insurance company. But if the opposite way happened, where I'm getting 100,000 but paying 20,000, then I'll drop my rate to make the clients happy and stay in business. We don't want to make too much money. We want to make, what's that?
So that would happen.
It does happen. I had a 2% decrease in my auto insurance last year. Personally, yeah. I have myself insured, so I watch it. I don't get a discount by the way.
Over this.
I don't get free insurance, nothing like that. I'm in the same boat as you guys, so I have to pay the rate. But yeah, there are decreases, especially when things change in your household, different cars, different drivers. It's a lot.
If they're gonna be driving still, I'm still worried.
Don't get worried. I mean, we also have carriers that are youthful driver friendly, and I have him insured and his kids. So luckily, I found a carrier that we brought it back down to his original rate without a second kid. So we put the second kid on and no change in his price. So this depends. Like I said, we're a broker, so we have a bunch of different companies. If you go to State Farm, all State Farmers, these guys only, and I used to be a farmer's agent, they only have that product. It's not like farmer's agent can tell you, oh, let me shop you a Progressive. I got Progressive, Safeco, Westfield, all that stuff.
Because I just came in, can you just show me how you got that?
Yeah. So I don't know where this is at. When you pull up a listing, you'll go see this map right here under the photos. What did I press? No. So the map will come up, and then you'll click on this button right here for the layers, and then just click on flood zone. And then you can.
So that means that's all of flood zone.
X, anything with an X in front of it is not a flood zone. Anything with an A in front of it would be a flood zone. So purple is bad.
Also, that is fine.
Yeah, orange, yellow, purple, I would say no, it's not good. So like I was saying, I wanted to find a house where it'll be confusing for the lender and for me. So this guy's house is not in a flood zone, but his garage is.
So that depends on the law.
Yeah, I don't need to put flood insurance, but the lender might say we have to put it.
To the entire home, which is the garage.
Yeah, see here. So this little shadow right here, that's got to be his house up front, and then any structure in the back is in a flood zone. I don't have to put flood insurance on it. His house is not in it, but the lender might say so. That's why I was asking like one time the lenders, what happens when you get this issue, right? Or how about this guy? Let's say he is in a flood zone, right? Let's say the lender says yes. Or I'm sorry, let's say the lender says no, but then you have a buyer buy this one. It's his next door neighbor.
Yeah.
So you can get like a new elevation certificate, for example, to try to pull it out. Have you done
I've
this?
done that before.
Yeah, so it costs money, what, like $700-800 to do, something like that. You can get somebody to go out there, survey the property again to determine the elevation of it and if it's in a high risk zone. So you'll see sometimes, let's see if we can find it actually.
What I did was I got it from the previous owner and the lender accepted it and gave me a new one.
Yeah, like this, see this? My guess is these houses here got themselves out of the flood zone, but everybody around them is still in it.
No, that's a 500-year flood zone.
Okay, here,
Oh, yeah, those people, you're right.
everybody around them is in the flood zone, but that house is not. No, they probably got an elevation certificate and redid the map for lending purposes. But you have to pay for it. I'm not sure exactly how it's done.
For them to change the whole flood.
It is, but if, let's say they pay $1,000, right, to do it, or even $2,000 to do it, that may save them just 1 year of 2,000 in flood insurance. So they either pay it there upfront, so it's separate.
Sometimes they keep reusing that, because that's what
Yeah.
I did with the last one, the lender accepted the old
Yeah,
one.
so if I come across something and we look, typically the person will tell me. The seller will either tell the buyer and then the buyer will tell me, because I'll tell them it's in a flood zone. They'll say, no, I have a certificate, don't give it to me. I send it to the carrier pays it. Underwriting is clear.
So wait a minute, so once you get certificate, it's now forever, it's just every year.
No, yeah, you can get the house removed. They give you an elevation certificate stating it's been removed from the flood zone. And I use that for underwriting to allow me to continue. Because there's a screen that says in a flood zone must be flood insurance.
But so then.
I don't think every year, it says like every year.
Oh, do you have to get it renewed? No, no.
Okay.
Only when you sell it.
Yeah.
When you buy it as a new owner, they don't go through it.
I don't know too much about, the process of the elevation certificate and getting it removed. I've never done it myself. I think realtors have come across it more than I have. I mean, if someone has in this brokerage, I would love to hear the
It's
process.
a very rare case.
Yeah, but it happens. I think, are they still talking about 4125 getting remapped?
Yeah, they're doing some work there too.
So, but yeah.
They're
What is
demolishing
it?
homes.
Is it just you raised it, foundation, or is it just a survey?
No, these flood maps are really old. It's not like they're done last year. So this, 4125 area and some parts of 4124 have been a flood zone for a long time. And like you'll get people like this. You'll get people like this that just went and hired someone to remap it, basically get an elevation certificate on it. And he'll come out, look at the property, where it's at, how high it's sitting, stuff like that, and determine, it doesn't classify anymore as a flood zone for him. But he's not in the authority to change the entire map.
So let's say that, that example right there, let's say in that block, everyone says, hey, look, why don't we all pitch in and just get a certificate? Could they do that?
They can, 100%. Or they can go to the city and like they're in talks with it and trying to get the entire map redone. But even like, this area to me, I don't think has been, see, here's another example here. This guy down here did it. So, but like when you get over to the other side of Telegraph, this zone always gets flooded. So I don't think they'll ever change that part of 4125.
So it have to be, some kind of history that has been.
This creek right here, you see the E-Course River?
Yeah.
You'll see anywhere there's water is gonna be the flood zone. Doesn't mean there's houses, because even up here, there's a flood zone, but there's no houses. Right? There's no houses here. This is just,
Swamp.
the swamp, what, the Rouge River? Is that Rouge?
Yeah.
Off of Outer Drive?
Yeah.
There's no houses there, but it has to be classified as a flood zone,
Oh, wait, Michigan,
right? So if it overflows, that's what happens.
wait. Is that Michigan?
Michigan Telegraph. Like it goes into the Rouge River, right? Yeah, Lower Rouge River. So like all this will be a flood zone, but there's no houses there. But yet right on Brady, over here, there's houses that are not in the flood zone. So anywhere there's water, it's gonna say anyway.
I'm just saying that it'll have to be justification to not next to the river or, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know the criteria really on getting it changed. or the process. I wish, I mean, that's something that actually I can go look into and see.
Elevation has a big factor.
Yeah, we'll see, like,
Elevation and how close it is and when the tide, like how high.
like I said last year, the whole city that really didn't have a flood zone or a flooding issue ended up flooding. So things are changing a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Guys, any other questions?
What's going on?
Am I done? No, well, unless you have a question.
Been here for 40 minutes.
It was waiting for you, it was gonna restart.
I held the whole class up for you, bro.
I need a cool.
We just started. You need a quote? Okay. Text me so I'll leave it on red right now.
Thank you, Ronny.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you Steven's brother? Somebody, I'm like, we don't look alike, but how